11:45 p.m. December 31, 2025, Tatarstan. A Russian Pantsir S-1 crew celebrates in their command vehicle, cheering as they intercept their 10th target of the night. They are blissfully convinced they've just saved the Volga's most critical commodity park. They have no idea they just expended their last $1 million interceptor on a $50 wooden decoy. In exactly 15 minutes, in one synchronized heartbeat, 3 strategic hubs will erupt. And this time, Russia will understand the price of shooting at ghosts. First, let's look at the targets on the map. We've got the Northern Commodity Park in Tatarstan, essentially a massive sea of crude oil sitting right on the Volga. Then there's the Liutyi Depot in Kaluga, a strategic fuel bank sitting right in Moscow's backyard. And finally, the Ilsky Refinery in Krasnodar, a high-tech maze dominated by those massive distillation towers that keep the Russian war machine lubricated. You see, while the rest of Moscow was busy pouring premium vodka, the technicians in Kiev were loading up the AN-196 Liutyi. This thing is Ukraine's premier long-distance heavyweight built from carbon fiber and pure spite. But the Liutyi group wasn't going in alone. It brought along some loud, cheap Shahed-type decoys to do the dirty work of getting noticed. This wasn't a random swarm. It was a programmed symphony of structural failure. To pull off a triple header across 3 different regions spanning 1,000 miles, you have to play the long game with mathematical precision. At 5 p.m., the first wave of AN-196 Liutyis took flight from deep inside Ukraine. These were the marathon runners, the Tatarstan strike team. They had a grueling 800-mile journey ahead of them, ghosting across the Russian heartland toward the Northern Commodity Park on the Volga River. At 8:30 p.m., the second wave launched toward the Liutyi Strategic Depot in Kaluga, just a stone's throw from Moscow. 30 minutes later, at 9 p.m. sharp, the final group accelerated into the night, destined for the massive distillation towers of the Ilsky Refinery in Krasnodar. Now, you might be wondering, how do you fly 1,000 miles into the most defended airspace on Earth without getting swatted like a fly? The answer lies in physics and a clever piece of code. These AN-196s weren't flying high where the big S-400 radars could spot them. Instead, they were hugging the Earth at 150 feet, terrain following like a cruise missile. The Russian radar is a giant holding a flashlight in a dark forest. If you're a bird in the sky, he's got you. But if you're a snake slithering through the tall grass in the valleys, he's just shining his light way over your head. But here is the real kicker. Ukraine knew that once these drones got close, the Russian electronic warfare units would crank their jamming to 11. They'd try to drown out the GPS signals until the drones were flying blind. Except these Liutyis didn't need GPS. They were equipped with a DSMAC AI terminal guidance system. This is high-end optical scene matching. It doesn't just see the target, it compares the real-time terrain with a preloaded 3D digital map. Inside that composite nose cone is a digital brain that's been fed thousands of high-resolution satellite images of the target. It looks at a river bend, a specific highway intersection, or the unique shape of a distillation tower and says, "Yep, that's my stop." While the Russian commanders were busy toasting to their impenetrable defenses, the dominoes were already starting to lean. 11:45 p.m. Across all 3 regions, the first waves have arrived. These are the Shahed-type decoys, and they are doing exactly what they were built to do: act like loud, arrogant targets. They're equipped with Luneberg lenses, small devices that make a $50 wooden drone look as big as a fighter jet on a radar screen. The Russian commanders don't hesitate. They see what looks like a massive incoming air raid and slam the launch buttons. One after another, $1 million interceptor missiles roar off the rails, streaking into the night to vaporize $50 pieces of plywood and lawnmower engines. To the Russians, this feels like a turkey shoot. They're high-fiving, convinced they've just saved the Volga's most precious oil. But here's the genius of the trap. While those crews are busy hunting ghosts in the clouds, the real assassins, the AN-196 Liutyis, are slithering in just a few feet above the snow. The curvature of the Earth creates a blind spot, a hidden corridor that Ukraine just turned into a highway for destruction. To the Russian radar, they don't exist, not until it's too late. Exactly at 0 a.m. as the first corks pop in Moscow and the Kremlin begins its New Year's toast, Tatarstan doesn't get fireworks. It gets a high-intensity thermal event that changes the map. The AN-196s don't just hit the facility, they find the brain. Guided by their onboard AI, they ignore the empty sheds and dive straight into the primary storage nodes. A massive, blinding white flash tears through the darkness, followed by a roar that shakes the very ground. In a heartbeat, millions of gallons of crude oil are converted into a pillar of fire that reaches for the stars. The Russian crews on the outskirts stop cheering. They look back at the horizon and see their protected facility turning into a billion-dollar barbecue. The first domino has fallen, and the fire is just getting started. The fireball in Tatarstan hasn't even reached its peak before the screaming starts on the Russian military frequencies. Back in the Kremlin, the high command is hitting the panic button with both hands. They aren't just reacting, they are entering a state of total, unadulterated hysteria. Their first move is a digital scorched earth policy. Turn everything on. And just like that, every electronic warfare station from the Volga to the Black Sea cranks its power to the absolute red line. Folks, imagine you're trying to have a conversation in a library and someone suddenly starts blasting a jet engine right in your ear. That's what the Russian EW did to the airwaves. They are trying to jam the Ukrainian drones, but in their blind rage, they've jammed themselves. Their own communication lines are now a wall of white noise. Their high-tech command and control, it just became about as useful as a tin can on a string. In the middle of this digital fog, Moscow scrambles their elite Su-35 fighters. These are $80 million beasts, the pride of the Kremlin. But as they roar off the tarmac into the freezing New Year's night, these pilots are walking into a shooting gallery where everyone is blindfolded. Picture being in that cockpit. Your radar screen is a chaotic mess of flickering static, what we call radar saturation. You're seeing 1,000 fake targets. You're flying a blind bull in a china shop. And down on the ground, the Pantsir crews are terrified. They just watched a billion-dollar facility turn into a volcano, and they aren't taking any chances. They see a blip, they pull the trigger. They don't care if it's a Ukrainian drone or their own wingman in a Su-35. It's a circular firing squad, and every Russian pilot up there knows that their own protective missiles are just as likely to vaporize them as the enemy. In the electronic chaos, the IFF identification friend or foe systems are failing. To a panicked Pantsir operator, an $80 million Su-35 looks exactly like a Ukrainian heavyweight drone. The hunters have become the hunted. But here is the real ticking clock that the Russian commanders missed while they were busy screaming into dead radios. The Pantsir S-1 batteries in Tatarstan are currently sitting in what we call the reloading gap. And this is where the math gets brutal. Those crews fired all 12 of their million-dollar interceptors at $50 plywood decoys. They are empty, and that is exactly the window Ukraine was waiting for. While the Russian crews are fumbling with frozen bolts and heavy cranes Wave 2 and Wave 3, the real heavy hitters are crossing the final perimeter. The eye of Moscow is completely blinded by its own EW noise. The GPS signals are jammed to zero. To a normal drone, this would be a death sentence. But the AN-196 Liutyi doesn't care about satellites. As they approach the Luneberg depot in Kaluga and the Ilsky refinery in Krasnodar, the onboard AI wakes up. The DSMAC-style guidance system opens its eyes. It scans the dark landscape, matching the thermal silhouette of the massive distillation towers against the high-res satellite maps in its brain. It recognizes that refinery. It recognizes that a refinery is like an old friend, but getting to the handshake is where the world's deadliest game of dodgeball begins. As the Liutyis close the final 3 miles, the Russian ground crews at Lyudnovo and Ilsky aren't just sitting on their hands. They know Tatarstan is already a volcanic ruin, and they are desperate. Since their long-range missiles are either empty or blinded by their own EW noise, they fall back on old-school violence. Suddenly, the night sky over the refineries is shredded by walls of tracers. We're talking about 30mm dual auto cannons and heavy machine guns pumping out thousands of rounds per minute. To the naked eye, it looks like a scene from a sci-fi movie, red and green streaks of light crisscrossing the dark, trying to create a physical curtain of lead. One Liutyi approaching the Ilsky refinery gets caught in a crossfire. A 30mm round clip is its wingtip, sending a shower of carbon fiber sparks into the night. The drone lurches its flight surfaces, screaming for stability. In a human-piloted jet, that's where the panic sets in. But the Liutyi's digital brain doesn't feel fear. It processes the damage in microseconds, adjusts its trim, and stays locked on the distillation tower's thermal signature. It doesn't stop, it doesn't bargain, and it absolutely will not quit until it reaches the objective. At the Lyudnovo depot, the Russians scramble a last-ditch defense high-intensity searchlights. They're trying to physically blind the drone's optical sensors, but the DSMAC AI is seeing in the infrared spectrum. Those blinding white lights are just a minor annoyance. The drone dives even lower, skipping over the perimeter fence by less than 10 feet, the turbulent air from its propeller kicking up a cloud of snow and gravel. A Russian guard on a rooftop tries to lead the drone with Enigma man pads, but because the drone is so low, the missile's seeker head can't distinguish the cold UAV from the warm background of the heated refinery buildings. The missile goes stupid, veering off and exploding harmlessly in an empty field. The Liutyis are now inside the inner sanctum. They are weaving through the maze of pipes and cooling towers, using the refinery's own structure as a shield against the AA guns. The Russian gunners have to stop firing. If they keep shooting at that low angle, they'll end up shredding their own million-dollar equipment. The drones have won the sprint. The onboard computer calculates the final impact vector, aiming for the vulnerable arch, the exact spot where the fuel lines meet the pressurized distillation core. At the exact moment the first New Year's toasts are raised in Moscow, the silence of the night is broken. Two massive synchronized explosions rip through the dark hundreds of miles apart. It's not just a bang, it's a structural surrender. In a flash of blinding orange, the heart of Russia's energy sector is physically torn open, leaving nothing behind but the roar of escaping gas and the realization that their billion-dollar impenetrable shield was just a paper curtain. In Kaluga, the fuel bank erupts in a high-intensity thermal event that sends a shockwave through the local power grid. But in Krasnodar, it's even worse. The AI-guided Liutyi dives straight into the core, the distillation towers. These aren't just tanks you can patch up. They are the high-tech heart of the refinery. When they go, the whole facility dies. The Russian commanders, still loitering in their reloading gap, can only watch their monitors go dark. Ukraine didn't just hit them, they played them. They used Russia's own panic to clear the path, turned their defense into a liability, and delivered a billion-dollar fireworks show that Moscow never asked for. One domino fell to clear the way, and the next two just crushed the Kremlin's energy soul. By the time the sun crawled over the horizon on January 1st, the Russian Ministry of Defense was already busy doing what it does best, crafting a fantasy. They called it minor technical incidents and successful interceptions. However, the smoke columns rising from Tatarstan, Kaluga, and Krasnodar were so massive they didn't just show up on satellite imagery, they were visible to the naked eye from passing commercial flights. You see, folks, Ukraine didn't just set some oil on fire. Anyone with a match can do that. They performed a triple bypass surgery on the Russian economy without using an anesthetic. The fire crews were still screaming into their radios hours later. And here is why the fire wouldn't go out. Ukraine didn't target the storage tanks. Those are just big buckets of fuel. Instead, they aimed for the critical nodes, the distillation towers and the control units. Think of a refinery like a human body. The storage tanks are the muscles, but those distillation towers, that's the brain and the heart. You can patch a muscle, but when the brain is fried, the body stops moving. These towers are high-tech, custom-built monsters that take months, sometimes years, to manufacture. And thanks to global sanctions, Russia can't exactly hop on Amazon and one-click a replacement. We are talking about long-term downtime. These facilities are legally dead for the foreseeable future. Now let's break down the 4 layers of this domino effect, because the math is absolutely brutal. We are looking at hundreds of millions of dollars in high-tech infrastructure turned into a collection of charred scrap metal. Tatarstan, Kaluga, and Krasnodar, 3 vital organs of the Russian energy sector, neutralized in a single night. That is a hit to the Kremlin's ATM that they simply cannot ignore. This isn't just about money, it's about flow. By knocking out these specific hubs, Ukraine has disrupted the internal supply chain. Logistics for the entire southern front just got a lot more complicated. When you can't refine the fuel, the tanks at the front don't move. It's a massive bottleneck that's going to ripple through their entire military machine. Moscow tried to play it cool, telling the public everything was under control. But in 2026, everyone has a smartphone. While the government was lying, thousands of videos from Russian citizens were flooding the internet, showing the massive fireworks Ukraine had delivered. It shatters the myth of the impenetrable shield. So, as the smoke continues to drift over the Russian heartland, the reality is setting in. Ukraine played a high-stakes game of New Year's dominoes, and they didn't just win, they cleared the table. Moscow is left with empty missile tubes, burning towers, and a very cold realization that their energy weapon just blew up in their own hands. Which part of this operation do you think was the most genius? Was it the radar horizon trick that left the big guns blind? The DSMAC AI that recognized the targets without GPS? Or that reloading gap that left the Pantsir crews helpless while the real killers arrived? Type 1, 2, or 3 in the comments below. I'll be pinning the most tactical breakdown. Smash that like button if you think Ukraine just redefined the term New Year's party. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next deep dive into how the underdog is rewriting the rules of modern war. Bye for now.